guys, welcome back to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today I'm going to teach you how to make stifado, which is a Greek stew. It's a rich tomato-based stew with onions in it. There's usually pearl onions or shallots, but this time I'm going to be using these smaller baby red onions, and instead of meat, I'm going to be making this with beans. My favorite beans to cook with are gigantes, also known as the giant lima beans. Those are the closest to the gigantes beans that I can get in my supermarket. We're still in a quarantine here, so this is quarantine cooking episode number probably 2 or 3. If you're watching this after this quarantine thing is over, this is a great recipe anyway. You can traditionally made with beef or chicken or lamb, but today we're making it with beans. We're making it economical, healthy, hearty, and delicious. Let's go over the ingredients so we can get started. We're gonna need some olive oil. These are some cooked giant lima beans, and I'll tell you how I did them in a little while. You can use any cooked beans that you have or any dry beans that you can cook later on. We're gonna need some salt, black pepper, crushed red pepper flakes, a bay leaf, some cloves of garlic, 2 cloves, and 1 cinnamon stick. We're also gonna need some canned tomatoes. I've just pureed them, a little bit of tomato paste, some dried oregano, and I have some small red onions, but you could use shallots or baby pearl onions. So I always have dry, uncooked beans in my pantry at all time. It's a pantry staple that I have before the quarantine, and I will continue to have afterwards, because it is nice to cook with beans every now and then. They're very healthy, they're very economical, they're so inexpensive, and they're delicious too. And giant lima beans are one of my favorites. So what I did was I put them in a big bowl and I soaked them in cold water overnight. Then in the morning, you want to drain that water out, and then you want to put them in a pot, cover them with cold water, bring it to a boil, and then reduce the heat to a medium and let them cook until they're tender. So about 40-45 minutes is what you're looking for. Then go ahead and drain them, season them with a little bit of salt, and then set them aside. They're ready to use. Now you can use all of them in this dish. You could use some of them and then mix the rest in some salads or some soups. You can make so many other things with them. I've made a few gigantes recipes and I will post them down below. If you don't have giant lima beans, this is the time to use what you have, because we're in a quarantine, so I want to use whatever I have on whatever I have on hand, and you should use whatever you have on hand. So if you have garbanzo beans, that's fine. If you have white northern beans or cannellini beans, use anything you have. You could even use a combination, and you can even use canned already cooked beans. That's that. Now we're going to begin by cooking the onions. Now traditionally stifado is made with shallots or with pearl onions, but almost everything is sold out of my supermarket every time I go, and I am limiting my trips. But I did have these red onions, and they are on the smaller side, so I'm just going to use these. If you have a bigger onion, use that. You can just cut it into quarters and fry that instead. So I'm just going to add some olive oil to my pot that's heating over medium heat, about a 1/4 cup. It might be a little more, but I'm very generous with the olive oil. Then I'm just going to add the onions in here. Basically, we're going to brown the onions for about 10 minutes on all sides all together, and then we're going to move on to the next step. So I did have to cover the pot because the onions do splatter a lot, and I didn't want to be wearing the oil, so make sure you cover the pot, and it is going to take longer than 10 minutes if you're using bigger onions. I've been cooking them for about 15 minutes now, and they're looking good. You don't want them to soften, you just want them to soften on the outside and to get really nice color. Now I'm just going to grate the garlic cloves, and make sure you reduce the heat to low. And if the oil seems super hot, you're going to want to drizzle a little bit more olive oil in there, just to kind of calm down the oil a little bit, so that when you add the garlic, it doesn't burn. And I did do that. I went in and I added about 2 tablespoons more olive oil. Now I'm going to add the grated garlic. And you don't want to leave it in there long at all because it's really hot. Next, you want to add the tomato paste, about 1 tablespoon. And I'm just going to immediately add the pureed tomatoes and just mix everything up. Now it's time to add all the remaining seasonings. So tomato paste and tomatoes tend to be very acidic. I am going to sweeten it up just a little bit to cut the acidity with about 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. You can do 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon. You could even leave the sugar out and use honey instead. I'm going to add some crushed red pepper flakes for heat. You can leave them out if you don't like the heat. I'm going to add the 2 cloves, the cinnamon stick, and the bay leaf. I'm also going to season with a little bit of salt and some freshly ground black pepper and about 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. If you have rosemary, you could throw a sprig of rosemary in here too. Give everything a nice mix. It smells so good. Now I'm just going to add the cooked beans. And I'm gonna season them with a little bit more salt. Mix everything all together. And I'm also gonna add a cup of water. I'm gonna bring everything to a boil, then I'm gonna reduce the heat to medium, and I'm gonna let this cook until the onions have softened and the beans are tender and the sauce is nice and thick. Now at this point, you can also put a pack of frozen spinach in here. That would be great. You could also add mushrooms to this. Just you would have sliced up some mushrooms and added them right after you were done browning the onions. And then you would add the garlic and all the remaining ingredients. That just adds a lot more richness and meatiness to the meal. But just like this, it's gonna be delicious. Once it's done, I'm gonna show you what it looks like. After 15 minutes, go in and take a look at it and see if the onions are soft and tender. You don't want them to be falling apart, and they won't be in that little amount of time, especially if you're using a bigger onion like I am. If you're using pearl onions or shallots, then yes, in 15 minutes they will be ready. Otherwise, just like mine, you might need an additional 10 minutes. Let it cook for an additional 10 minutes or until the sauce is nice and thick and the onions are fork tender. If you can stick a knife in there easily and it's soft all the way through, then you know it's done. Give it a taste and see if it needs any more salt and pepper. If it does, now's the time to add it. Go ahead and finally chop up some fresh parsley and sprinkle it on top, and it is time to serve. Now, of course, you can definitely serve this with some feta cheese, but there is so much flavor in this that you can serve it as is with some nice toasted bread and you will be good to go. But you can do feta cheese on top of this. Some Kalamata olives would be great. My mouth is watering thinking about this. It smells so good. Also, make sure to take out the bay leaf and the cinnamon stick. And if you can find the cloves without digging through it, take those out too, because they do lend a beautiful aroma and a taste, but they are not fun to bite into. So just letting you know, take them out when you see them. And the leftover tomato paste can be transferred into a plastic bag and stored in the freezer. It keeps fresh for months. It is time to take a bite. And the onion should just come apart easily once it's totally cooked. I love the flavor of Stifado stew. The onions are perfectly nice and sweet. All the aromas and all the aromatics just add such good flavor. The beans are perfectly cooked. The gigantes are my absolute favorite. It would not hurt to sprinkle some feta cheese on top of this. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. Head on over to the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Print this out. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I will see you all next time. Yes, us.